I don't want my daughters wasting time thinking about how much they weigh, what they look like, and I think that fashion has done a terrible job of reinforcing a really unrealistic beauty ideal.
The entrepreneur who's driving a multi-billion-dollar retail empire while trying to redefine the world of fashion. British businesswoman Emma Grede is partnered with one of the most famous families in Hollywood. She's chief executive and co-founder of the inclusive fashion brand Good American, which she launched in 2016 with Khloe Kardashian. She's also the founding partner of shapewear label SKIMS, alongside Khloe's sister, Kim.
As a young black female entrepreneur, the only thing that I could do was what I know from my experience. And the honest truth is, I didn't set out to create a company that was like deeply rooted in the principles of inclusivity and diversity. I set out to make a company that was right for me.
In this episode of Leaders with Lacqua, I speak to Emma Grede about her rise to the top, how she measures success, and why diversity remains elusive in the world of fashion. Emma Grede, thank you so much for joining us on Bloomberg.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is so exciting. I mean, you represent so much for so many people. Everything you touch, all the businesses you touch, turn into gold. Did you ever think that you would be such a success?
No, and that's mostly because most of the businesses that I touched early in the days didn't turn to gold. I love this idea of like overnight success, and I feel like I'd love to continue to perpetuate that myth. But you know, I've just done a lot, and there's been a lot of trial and error along the way, and I feel like I've probably done every job imaginable, from having like a paper route when I was 12, to working in a deli, to working in shops, to starting things that were less successful, to starting things that had medium success. I feel like there's been a long journey, and I'm really thankful that now I'm, 41 years old, and I'm starting to see like this type of success, which is really great.
I know, but you were always starting the journey.
Always.
You always wanted, to succeed. Is that what actually makes your success?
I think so. I also think, there's an element of luck in any of these things, right? But then when you kind of take apart what luck means, I really believe that when opportunity meets preparation, I was always prepared. And when my opportunity came along, I was ready to really work for it. And then there is just that old adage of a lot of hard work. And I've really, really put the time in, I think.
Did you always want to be an entrepreneur?
No, I never knew what an entrepreneur was. If you'd have asked me when I was a kid, I came from East London, and I didn't know anyone who had their own business. Everyone that I knew went to work to pay their bills with usually very little joy in it. So even the idea of doing something that felt purposeful or meaningful or something you enjoyed really wasn't part of my understanding. I tried really hard to get close to what it is that I love, which is the fashion business, but I didn't ever think about starting my own thing. I think it actually came out of a necessity. I was like, who's going to employ me and pay me what I think I deserve? And I left a company because I was like, they're just not paying me properly, so I'm going to have to just pay myself.
Wait, age?
24.
And it was the determination of actually, making something.
Yeah, do you know what it was? I felt like I was adding a lot of value, and I think so many people through their careers have this feeling, right? I'm adding a lot of value, and I'm not being remunerated for what I bring to the table, and that feeling became so strong in me. But what do you do at 24? You don't really have that many options, and so I did what a lot of people do. I went to a company and tried to do my best at the position that I was given, and thankfully somebody saw that and decided, okay, maybe we'll set this girl up on her own. But I talked to so many, either young people that I employ or people that are trying to get noticed, and I honestly think that's such amazingly good advice, because no one's ever going to look at you to do the next thing unless you're excelling where you are today. And so sometimes just buckling down and doing the absolute best job at wherever you are is the best way to get ahead.
But then actually making the step of leaving and setting something on your own, you have to be brave, and it's not always easy.
No, it wasn't always easy. Especially, I remember the first time that I got a little bit of backing, and they said to me, Emma, you're going to be in charge of your own P&L. And I was like, fantastic. And I wrote it down. I went home and Googled it, like, what is a P&L? Sometimes naivety is the best thing for any entrepreneur. I didn't know what I didn't know, and therefore I just kind of had to go for it and learn fast and fail fast. And I think I've done throughout my career, I haven't made the best choices every time, but I think part of being a good entrepreneur is knowing when things are not going right and knowing what you don't know. And I've surrounded myself with the right people continuously.
So what's the biggest mistake that you've learned from?
You know, I think the biggest mistake was probably when I had my first agency, ITB, and I was killing it in London. And so there is this idea that the company was completely exportable. And I went to the US, opened an office in New York. That office went really well. And then I opened in LA, and I failed miserably, underinvested, didn't bring the right people in, just thought that whatever I was doing would translate, and it didn't. And I learned that the hard way. I learned that by starting something, dragging people there, and then having to close it. And there's nothing like a bit of sort of embarrassment to humble the soul. I was like, I'll go back, packed everything up, and literally like had to pack my own office back up. And so that was a fantastic learning. But again, I never let it break my spirit. I really truly took those learnings, and when I started my second company in LA, I was like, okay, this is where I need to do something different. And so I literally packed up my family and went and moved to LA, and knew that if I was going to do something that was going to be successful, I'd need to do it myself, I'd need to be in the country, and I'd need to give it my absolute all.
So is that also giving time to understand a market? I mean, was it that it was difficult to do it from not being in the city? You
know, being in country, being part of the fabric of that culture has been really important, especially for my business, Good American, that really is about what's happening at the moment. Like, where are we in society as women? Where is fashion? And I think that's been really, really important, to be like where it's all happening.
But that's a really bold move, actually, selling denim to Americans.
Yeah, it really was. Nobody needs more blue jeans, like, let's be honest. I actually doubted myself when we started. But again, coming to a business with mission and purpose at the heart of what we do is what sets us apart. And so I think there are so many brands, but how do consumers make choices these days? And right now, we make our choices based on what we believe in, what we feel is important, what we want our children to see. And I'm a mother of 4, and so I know only too well that I don't want my daughters wasting time thinking about how much they weigh, what they look like. And I think that fashion has done a terrible job of reinforcing a really unrealistic beauty ideal. And so with Good American, the whole premise of the brand was to say, we're going to make clothes for all women, we're going to let women make their choices, and hopefully we're going to take some of that pain out of what it means to be left out of the conversation or not represented in fashion. And we've done that pretty well, I think.
So Emma, you have this idea, right, of inclusivity, of making women feel good. Mm-hmm. Who do you talk about it with first?
Funnily enough, my husband. You know, because I think that we're both entrepreneurs, and so it's natural for me to bat any idea backwards and forwards with him. But, you know, I've worked for years in the fashion business, and so I've been part of the problem, right? It's like I've seen firsthand how some fashion businesses make women feel. And I think there's one thing, you know, being really vocal and being an Instagram activist and talking about something, there's a difference than putting your money where your mouth is and really trying to do something about the problem. And that's what I did with that business. It was about, how do I take everything that I know and I've learned and actually do the opposite? And I think that as a young black female entrepreneur, the only thing that I could do was what I know from my experience. And the honest truth is, I didn't set out to create a company that was like deeply rooted in the principles of inclusivity and diversity. I set out to make a company that was right for me and my friends. And I knew that if I had a problem, chances are somebody else does. And I think that's where so many businesses are, you know, created, when you're solving a problem that's real for you and therefore real for the consumer.
Is there a danger that, you know, some entrepreneurs look at numbers too much and look for, you know, a gap in the market where
It's very true. It's very true. And I think that's one way to approach things. And there's a certain sense, but for me, you know, I go with my gut, and gut instinct tells me a lot, and I tend not to go against my gut. Now, I'd be lying if I said I didn't run some numbers and feel like there was commercial opportunity here, right? Nobody makes 19 sizes of anything without thinking, I reckon I can sell them somewhere along the line. But I definitely think so much more of what I've done throughout my career has been in response to a feeling that I've had and then acting on that feeling.
Were you surprised at how many other people felt like you?
Yeah.
Were you?
Yeah, honestly, I mean, it's one of those things that, like, on paper, Good American has been such a massive success. But if you wind back to day one, everyone's like, you sold $1 million in day one. The truth is, you know, 9 o'clock I was the hero. By 11 o'clock I had no stock left, and everyone was like, you have no idea what you're doing, do you? And I was like, no, actually I don't. And in a way, that was my first lesson in what it means to be excellent from a customer experience point of view, because I just started emailing people and I was like, how long do I think people will wait? Turns out not that long, certainly not as long as it was going to take me to make stock. I was emailing customers. Well, both actually. I was like, can you help me get some more fabric? Will you wait 8 weeks for a pair of jeans? And somewhere in that it all kind of worked out. But I think, again, what people respond to is brands that have authenticity, and there's a level of honesty that's needed. And I went and said, you know what, we had no idea how popular and how much this was going to chime with customers. And if you can just be patient, we're going to get you something. Hands up, we know we messed up and we don't want to disappoint you. And there's a part of that honesty that actually really chimed with people. They knew that we weren't feeding them a line. It was clearly not written by a PR, because I couldn't afford PR at that point.
Were you signing Emma?
Oh yeah, like lots of love, Emma X. You know, how I'd you know, speak to my mom or something.
Coming up, Emma agreed on her attempts to break one of the last taboos in fashion, and how success is making her reassess what it means to be an entrepreneur. Emma Grede has made a personal fortune by founding inclusive and progressive clothing companies. Good American was the biggest denim launch in history when it made $1 million in sales on its first day. She tells me about her success and the challenges that remain across the industry.
Has fashion done, I mean, it hasn't done enough when it comes to inclusivity and diversity, but has it done something in the last 5 to 10 years?
Well, you know, it's interesting because fashion, as quick as it is to change, like in the kind of aesthetic, it's very difficult to change a system, right? And I think that that comes down to who makes decisions. And the people that make decisions in fashion don't typically look like me. They aren't typically women all the time. When we look at who's at the helm of the biggest high street players, it tends to be the same type of people. And so I honestly think there's a lot of work to be done. Progress has definitely happened, but you only have to look at the last, like, New York Fashion Week, which is the biggest and the most commercial, to see that, you know, there's so much tokenism around what inclusivity really means. And I think that, especially when it comes to size, we're back where we were 20 or 30 years ago when you'd have one single black model that would walk down the catwalk. Now we're in that same situation where, you know, I can't remember the stat, but I think it's less than 3% of models that came down the catwalk were above a size 12. I mean, a size 12 is like less than average. And so there's just so much work to be done there. And it almost, size is the last allowed taboo. You know, we're allowed to disclude people because of their size, and it's really crazy.
I was reading something saying, you know, people feel a bit rubbish when they look at all this stuff because they don't feel represented and they feel that there's something wrong with them.
Yeah, and that's the whole reason I started the brand, because, you know, if you go back 7 years ago, I was pregnant with my second child, a girl, and I really felt that deeply, like how much time and effort you can spend and waste time. And to me, it's like, if you take out some of that, you know, worry and the strife around how much we think about our looks and instead put our energy into saying, I need a pay rise, I think I should be doing something else with my life. Like, part of it was really like, what happens if you shift and change the paradigm of how people see themselves? And, you know, it's a really trite sentence, but representation really matters. When you see a version of yourself in something, there's a level of acceptance. And that's what I wanted to do, just like level the playing field and say, you know what, like, we all look different, we all are different, and that's okay. Like, that is not what we should be thinking about. We should be thinking about, like, equal pay. Like, they're the things that we should use our time for as women. Let's just get like an equality going with men. And that, I mean, throughout the workplace, throughout all of the industries. And honestly, I feel like the media has such a huge impact on us. And I don't mean just fashion media, I mean the media at large. And so we need to see better representation everywhere in society.
Is that why you're doing Dragon's Den?
Well, you know what? It's so interesting. You asked me earlier, you know, what did I think about being an entrepreneur? And I honestly just never thought about being an entrepreneur. But as I've got more successful, I thought a lot about what it means to be an entrepreneur, because they talk about it being really small at the top, but it's not small at the top. Like, it's minuscule. It's the same people doing the same deals, giving each other money, who all typically went to like one of 5 or 6 schools. And so for me, you know, because I'm on Shark Tank in the US, and the idea of Dragon's Den, and that you could be an entrepreneur with seemingly very little background and absolutely no access to funding and walk knock on and get a check to start to do something that means something to you and that can mean something for your family, I'm like, why wouldn't you? You know, it wasn't so long ago that I was out fundraising. And so I'm just like, if I could be a small part of somebody's journey that wouldn't usually get the opportunity, to me it just makes so much sense. And it's not just about women, not just about women of colour. It's like, if you didn't have the means or the education to know anything differently than getting up and going to work every day, that doesn't mean to say you can't have a successful business. I am like walking proof of that, right? It's like, I left school when I was 16 years old and I've done pretty well. So to me, it's about leveling the playing field. And I love the idea of that being seen on TV and people having that idea that they can be successful if they just get an opportunity.
Is entrepreneurship in the UK different to the US? In the US, there's almost a badge of honor of trying, of failing, of trying again, of starting again. I don't know if there's a stigma in the UK, but people are less bold. Is it?
You know, I don't think they're less bold. I think that there is more, you know, we're different here. We don't celebrate it in the same way. And I find that really difficult to say because I feel like I'm so celebrated, especially where I'm from. Like, people in London are so nice to me. Like, I turned up in this office and like 2 girls come up to me and they're like, oh my God, we love you, like high five. And so I think things are shifting. And you know, what I am all about is like celebrating people. And listen, it doesn't all work out, but that's also part of life. And I think that we just have to be a little bit more honest with ourselves about what it takes and how hard it is.
It's hard because you need to build team around you. You need funding.
Oh yeah.
There is a little bit of luck. What have you found hardest?
If I'm really honest, probably the funding piece, because I think without the right background and circles around you, access is really difficult. You know, for me, I raised my first check from my clients because I'd built a business in, you know, fashion media. And so I had lots of clients. So the only like quote unquote rich people I knew were clients of mine that had been paying me retainers. And so that was, for me, the easiest way. I was like, hi, remember me? Would you like to give me $3 million? Most of them said no, but a couple said yes. You know, so I think just knowing where to go in the beginning, and they're the barriers that most people face. But once you're in it, you know, I think that it's all so much about the journey. Like, none of this stuff happens like it does on social media. And I think just knowing that, you know, you're on a journey. And actually, I honestly think the best way to start a business is with no money. You don't need to go out and raise tons of finances. You need to figure out, like, what am I creating? Where is my audience? And what am I uniquely good at? Because when you figure out what you're good at, you know who else you need around you to make something really work.
I mean, Kris Jenner was part of your journey.
Yes, very much so.
I mean, how did that kind of, you know, shape the entrepreneur you are?
Well, you know, I think that I've been really lucky to be surrounded by so many incredible entrepreneurs, starting with my clients, also my husband, being around people like Kris, and also just having access and listening and watching some brilliant people as I grew up, you know, just even on the TV, you know, really soaking that up. And I am one of those people that can learn from anything. You know, I've read books about being an entrepreneur before I even really knew what one was. And so I really am someone that, like, I'll take from any situation that you let me.
Coming up, Emma Grede tells me why diversity is a superpower and what she's doing to try and improve access and opportunity. Emma Grede is perhaps best known as the founding partner of SKIMS, along with Kim Kardashian. The shapewear brand was valued at $4 billion last year. I continue the conversation by asking Emma about the business and her commitment to supporting diversity and Black-owned companies.
SKIMS is also huge. Did you ever think that actually an underwear, I mean, what do you call it, an underwear shaping company?
Yes, I mean, we make underwear, solution wear. You know, SKIMS has grown so unbelievably. And, you know, that is Kim Kardashian's company. It was her idea from the outset. And I honestly believe that we never thought that it would just be one thing. You know, we always thought about it as being this huge company that would do lots of things well. But again, that company was based on just doing one product really, really well. And I think that's testament to any great company. We had so much focus in the beginning. We were like, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna make superior shapewear in every single size, in every single color. And it worked out incredibly well.
And now also selling to men. When's the right time to, I guess, either grow or go into a slightly different branch?
Well, you know, it's so interesting because in Good American, the first time we ever thought of going into another category was because customers asked us to. And I think it's a really smart way to think about your growth and your development in a business. Like, you really have to listen. And it's you can't take that commentary, like just the good things, because your customers will tell you what you need to hear. They will also tell you what you don't want to hear. And it's like a big fat mirror, right? And I feel like that's one of the things where social media is so exceptionally important in business right now, because it is just a reflection of everything you're doing, a reflection of your consumer base. And if you're listening carefully enough, the data will tell you things, and all you need to do is tune into that. And so when I think about category expansion, it really is in regards to or in relation to really what customers are asking me for, and we make those decisions based on that.
But how do you build a team that can also say, no, Emma, this is not a great idea?
You know what, that is a great question. I think I spend about 25% of my time hiring, and I will take speculative meetings even if I don't have a position that's available, because you're only as good as your team. And to do what I do, you have to surround yourself with experts, like people that are really, really good at what they do. And part of that is being able to stand up to you and you being able to listen. And so, you know, when I think about myself as a leader, I really lead with empathy, because I need people to be able to say to me, that's a bad idea, or based on my experience, because my experience is limited.
Do you think it's different being a leader in 2024 than it was in 2004?
100%, because the workforce has changed immeasurably, right? If we think post-pandemic, also the generation that we're dealing with right now, it's entirely different. And you have to create a company that can succeed with the workforce that it has at its disposal. And so I think there's been enormous amounts of change.
Younger?
Yeah, I think younger people have a different expectation of their life and their work and how those two things fit together. And like it or not, COVID changed the working environment forever. And you either adapt or you die. I might have a certain opinion about how I want people to come into a space, into a business, but at the end of the day, you've got to work with where the culture's at, and I'm not here to fight the culture. I'm like, okay, it is what it is. How do we work to maximize this? Because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing.
How do you spot, a good entrepreneur, like on Dragon's Den? How do you decide whether you're all in?
You know, I am so personality driven. Of course, a good idea is a good idea, and a white space is a white space. But if I meet someone that just like does something to me, like I feel it immediately. I'm like, it's you.
What, fire in the belly? Like, how would you describe it?
Fire in the belly. It's sometimes just like mad passion. Like, I could get excited about an origami company if somebody comes to me and they're like, it's like, I'm that person, and I respond to that because that's who I am. But I also really respond to the fact that I'm like, sometimes seeing a little bit of yourself, knowing that someone hasn't got another opportunity or a chance, I'm like, I'll have a crack, I'll have a go at you.
What's Emma Grede going to do in 5 years?
Oh, I don't know. Lie down.
I don't believe that for 1 second.
No, it's true. I'll find something else. I'm really focused on a lot of my non-profit work these days. Mm-hmm. I'm the chairwoman of an incredible organisation called the 15% Pledge, which is really focused on creating some semblance of balance in, the world of black-owned businesses, figuring out how they can show up in retail with more balance. And I honestly believe that, any way that I can use my voice, use my influence, and use the knowledge that I've built over all this time for good is a good use of my energy.
Why is it so underfunded still?
It's so interesting because it's about access. I think about this all the time. Talent is fairly evenly distributed, opportunity isn't. And what we need is to give more people opportunity, regardless of education, race, background, age, all the things. And so it's about leveling the playing field. We come back to that same idea. Who gets to be an entrepreneur? Who gets to make decisions? And so I really believe that the more we can open that up, the better it is for everybody. And I've proven in my businesses that diversity actually is a superpower. The more people you have at the table, the more customers you can serve. It's just good business. It's not about being holier than thou or giving somebody an opportunity that doesn't deserve it. It's actually about being able to service as many customers as you can, and the more minds that you have around the table that reflect your customer base, the better.
Emma Grede, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.